So a little bit about me. I thought I would share a never before seen footage of myself just to explain a little bit about how I got here. So I've always been incredibly curious about how things work and what incentivizes people, right? What incentivizes their behavior? Why do people act a certain way? And I've also worked for several API teams where I started off being able to try and document APIs, which we know is not a nice to have, right? It's a really critical part, for example, when it comes to security. And then as my career grew, more and more of it became focused on building world-class APIs. And then I got to work for several marketplaces and worked for, as Bill mentioned in his talk, in his keynote, he talked about Jason Harmon. And I was fortunate enough to work for him at UShip, which is a marketplace and a small company here in Austin a long time ago, building some of those APIs that powered that marketplace platform. And then fast forward, I've been living in Austin for a long time, grew up here, but then 10 years ago, I got a phone call out of the blue to go work for a distributor up in Dallas-Fort Worth. So I've actually been in the Dallas-Fort Worth area now since 2014. And so during that time, when I worked in distribution, I learned a lot about how to manage things like mergers and acquisitions, the digital side of working with suppliers like a TI and NVIDIA. And so it was just really exciting, but I wanted to get back to working more closely with APIs and software. Also in the distribution world, when you knew about things like APIs and API integration, they were kind of intimidated by the idea of APIs, right? So I really wanted to get back into a culture that was very API first, API friendly. And then most recently, I worked for a company called Axway, which is a longtime leader in full lifecycle API management. I had the fortunate time to work for Vince Padua, who's the CTO, and he lives here in Austin. And then 4 years ago, AWS asked me to join the AWS Marketplace. And so I was so excited because I had never worked for a cloud service provider. And during my time in the AWS Marketplace, which is one of our 300 services, APIs if you will, right? I really got to work with ISV companies like the ones that you work for and help you grow your business using AWS Marketplace. And so I want to share a lot of the insights that I learned from working with companies and helping them grow, not only from a product-led standpoint, but also from a sales-led standpoint. I typically work with the SVP of alliances, for example, the channel managers, folks that are really focusing on partnerships to help grow your company. I couldn't be here without partners. So I currently sit in the partner organization. And I'm really thrilled because day in and day out, these are the partners that I work with. I manage the partnership on a global level between AWS and these partners, and it's just incredible, right, to see what you do when you have a partner anywhere in the world and you can go together. So here's what you'll get out of this talk. So this working backwards method is something that really is driving the culture inside of all of Amazon. And so I just want to talk about what this method is and some real examples that helped us launch some very, very interesting solutions for our customers and kind of what we had to do to get there. And then I'm also going to talk about the why, and I'll explain. When I'm working with a chief revenue officer, when I'm working with a CEO, many of you are founders, sometimes those personas, those executives, right, they have to be able to, you have to work backwards from what they're measured on, because if I have to talk to a CRO and mention that, for some aspects of this partnership, we need an API integration to power the partnership, right, so we can automate things and work more closely together and really be more strategic and focus on a lot of the things that we're doing together. And so that's where, the SVP of sales, et cetera, they'll say, oh gosh, now I need to get that into my product sprint, right? And so there's kind of competing concerns where they need to focus on your product, your API, your platform, but then now you have to inject some sort of integration from the partnership that is really critical for growing the business. And so it's all about understanding the landscape. And so I'm going to share with you some of the tools that I created very specifically for this conference. It's based on the working backwards method and how I've applied it. So this is what I've created. And you'll see it a couple times because my thought is, I know there's a lot there, but the repetition may be helpful. And I'll kind of explain. So think of the fact that this is a funnel. And so at the very top, it's all about the end user experience and developer experience. So I have a former life in developer relations and very passionate about that. However, I would remember when we were in developer relations, if we had a new leader, sometimes we would be, we would have to then live in a CRM. But as you know, when I'm talking to a developer, an architect, it might not be linear. Also, I don't want to have to just put those conversations in a CRM, right? There's got to be a better way. And so the reason why this is so important is this is the funnel, and it's tracing the relationships and the revenue. And there's basically think of two different ways. I know this is oversimplified, and we'll hear more from Derek and Sid and others, right, talking about monetization. But the product-led growth is going to be very different than the sales-led growth. And I'll share what that's all about. So product-led growth, everything from open source to self-service, that adoption is so critical. So, our partner Postman, as you might know, there's 35 million users, right, that use their product, including API product managers. I'm a former API product manager. And so that product-led growth adoption is really critical. And then the sales-led growth, now that's a part I'm going to really focus on because it's all about the fact that there are levers that basically you can apply in strategic conversations that customers don't even know about. I was literally talking to someone here that said, we need a specific security tool, but when I go back, I'm not sure if I can get my organization to buy it. And so I was able to share some of those levers, and I'll share with everyone here kind of, did you know that, given the current economic conditions, for example, the AWS marketplace or the marketplace model then allows a customer, when they buy your product, to have more of this, reasons I put down there, where it's governance, security and compliance, eliminating things like shadow IT, and then for the sales folks, helping them with the legal aspects, as well as anything that we call like where a deal goes to die. Basically, that marketplace model helps to revive and then make it as fast as possible, which is really exciting. So the working backwards method, even though I show the stages here, it's actually cyclical because you're hearing feedback from everywhere, inside the company, outside of the company. And so how are you creating mechanisms that are collecting that feedback? And so I was going to talk about our culture. In Amazon, 2001, we were a monolithic application with teams, right? As you know, it was selling books on a website. And we really need to adopt DevOps practices so that we could break into these small, nimble teams. And today, in 2024, we still have that. It's small, nimble teams. And so that's something that I'm really excited about. We've really retained what I feel like is that day one, it feels like the world's largest startup is what it feels like. And then I talked a little bit about how DevOps, there's a lot of misconceptions. It's not only an engineering practice or a manufacturing practice, it's also a business concern. The more that every single person is empowered to do a lot more where you are, the more that we can go a lot faster. And so it's not, it's meaning DevOps has pervaded, right, all of culture. And then I wanted to just talk about our CTO, Werner Vogel, in 2021. He talked about how APIs enable customer-centric innovation. So it's like that example I talked about earlier with sales, where sometimes the sales folks I talk to say, well, can we just skip that part? And I mentioned to them, of course, now with machine learning and AI, there's a lot of things that we can do a lot faster. And so these are 2 out of our 16 leadership principles, and this is where that working backwards method comes from. And so what it means is when you're innovating, you're going to be misunderstood for long periods of time. Because when you innovate, you have this long view, right? Listen to this talk again, maybe in 5 years, right? And let's see how much of it holds true. And the most important step is listen. So I actually took an entire year of a break where I just listened to all of you. I read your blog articles. I attended your talks, right? I spent a whole year just listening because I genuinely wanted to understand without arriving at a solution. And so what I learned was when we talk about the customer obsession, that customer, it's many different layers, right? It's your customer is your end customer, or my customer is the partner. And so that piece is really important. Self-service, so this was a talk that I did around how you can build a private marketplace so that no longer are folks, going out and just with a click of a button or with a credit card swipe, because, procurement and IT, they want to make sure to have some governance over that. But as a builder, I don't want to wait, right? I need that tool. And then here's the other set of stakeholders where they need runway, time, attribution, which is often very hard. Like if you and I are having a conversation, how are you going to capture that to see that it led to some sort of, per se, a sale? Relationships and reach. And so it's really working backwards from the needs of these leaders and really explaining to them, okay, this is what you're trying to do, right? So the chief product officer is both in the now and in the future. I've got to take care of my customers now, but I'm trying to reach a new set of customers. And then same thing with the chief marketing officer. They have to drive the pipeline for both the product-led and the sales-led growth. After you listen, it's really looking for those patterns. So I absolutely loved our keynotes today, where that's what it was about. What are the patterns that we're seeing after we listen, right? We're constantly in that listen mode. And then this is the part that I think is very peculiar to our culture, but I'm seeing many of our customers pick it up, is now you take that problem that you're trying to solve and you ask why 5 times, and you create a short narrative that describes exactly what you're solving and who you're solving it for. And in sentences, like full sentences and no PowerPoint. And then what's really exciting is you take folks together, like this group, and for maybe the first 10, 15 minutes, it's silent, and you actually read that narrative together. And then you talk about the approach. This is another bit that's really interesting, and I've seen all different personas apply it. So it's called the PRFAQ, and what it means is you pre-write what the external announcement is about, along with frequently asked questions of what you anticipate people are going to ask about your launch. This is very powerful. I met a CRO recently that said, I actually do this for my sales teams, where think of what you're going to do with this customer, think really big, and what would it look like if that was a public announcement? And so what's exciting is I'm going to show you in the next tranche of slides what my colleague Phil Simpson, he lives in Austin, what he did, and he used this working backwards method. But just know that even though this bit was published in 2023, he worked at that whole working backwards cyclical method, right, for a few years, wrote the paper, and it was so exciting to see him launch this. And I would see it in the news, and I would say, Phil, that's you, right? And so as you're looking through this example, it was delivered at reInvent, think of who was the customer in this scenario, those layers of customers. Okay, so it's called vendor risk assessment. It's a feature of the AWS Marketplace, and what it does is the patterns that we saw when we were measuring was, say any of you, right? You meet a new customer here at the API Summit, but oh gosh, now they've got to onboard you as a new vendor, right? There's all kinds of things, compliance, security, right? Things that you have to go through. It could really cut down the sales cycle. So what's happening is right? My friend at Trend Micro was saying, gosh, I want to focus more on improving the security posture, right? That piece is really important to me. I don't want to be stuck in this sort of like pre-procurement land. And so the buyer is the customer, and this is what we were solving for vendor insights, right? This is what they have to go through. But for a company like a Trend Micro, or a Postman, it's okay, but every new customer that wants to bring us on, I've got to answer 300 questions manually. Like, that's very difficult. And so that's why we launched this, and it basically allows you to have that real-time insights. And it doesn't, it doesn't cost anything, and so it's super helpful, And then we were solving this, of course, for the buyer, right, by having that dashboard that they could rely on. And then, as you can see, the CEO persona is saying, there's that extra confidence to buy third-party software through the AWS Marketplace. So the last part is really just summarizing this working backwards method. When I joined AWS, I said, great, I would love to go to API Summit in 2019, showcase the Marketplace APIs. And they said, hold on, we're not ready. So I'm pleased to announce that we finally have this new set of APIs that's for Marketplace sellers. And so this is my contribution, right, for the working backwards method. And then in the very final bits, it just shows that when basically a buyer or seller is using Marketplace, they both have a ton of benefits, whether it's saving time, accuracy, or this method called private offer, which is custom terms and conditions. So I just want to mention key takeaways. One is understand the operating landscape, and I'm happy to talk to anyone after this. I'll be around at the conference. I'll also be here tomorrow attending many of your talks. And just go through each one, right? Because everyone's business model is going to be very different. And these are the questions and the things I'd love for you to do. So think of that one idea that's probably sitting in your tablet or notebook or phone. And I'd love for you to try this process. And then I would love at the next API Summit to see what it was that you launched for your customer, or maybe it's a problem that you solved inside the company. I would absolutely love to hear how you were able to implement this working backwards process. The biggest thing that people forget to do is celebrate the launch, right? So once you've done that, maybe you can get your company to write a press release about it and just make a huge splash. Thank you so much for having me. And Dirk is my colleague who traveled all the way from Germany to give his talk about integrations. His background is really interesting. He was one of the first partner solution architects working in Germany. And so I hope you'll give his talk a check out. So thanks a lot.